Right now, I'm very pleased to welcome back to the Schilling Show Jim Bacon, who's on the Board of Advisors for the Jefferson Council. Today with some updates on that organization and their efforts at the University of Virginia. Hey, Jim, welcome back to the Schilling Show. Great to have you with us today.
Good afternoon, Rob.
Hey, would you tell us, for people who are not familiar with the Jefferson Council, or maybe have heard the title but don't understand what you're all about?
Oh, sure. We started out as an alumni organization, although we're open to anybody who's interested in what's going on at UVA, and we're dedicated to promoting free speech, civil dialogue, intellectual diversity, and upholding the Jeffersonian legacy.
I want to stop on just one of those. They're all important to talk about, but the topic of intellectual diversity, that's really been a problem at UVA, not just UVA, but since we're talking about UVA, how does that manifest?
Well, primarily in the faculty there's in so many ways. I mean, first off, it can be seen in the ideological or the partisan sympathies of the faculty members and staff, people who contribute to presidential and other campaigns. Is overwhelmingly, it's like a 19-to-1 ratio of Democrats to Republicans among those who donate. So that's off the top. Then there are the various kind of codes of conduct that have been adopted, and how they're administered, and how maybe they're administered to certain groups in a different way than they are to other groups. And so we perceive a double standard in favor of kind of more leftist groups and against more either apolitical or conservative groups.
So I've got to ask you about the faculty. I'm so interested in this, and I remember encountering this in my own education in California when I was in college. But is this by design that the faculty is 19-to-1 stilted to the left, or is that just who's available in the market? Tell me what your analysis of that is.
Well, I think both things come into play. From what we have observed, and UVA is probably not as bad as your friends in California, but they're less overt. But there is, I would say, faculty members in department after department seek to hire other faculty members like themselves, particularly those who kind of agree with them, and they are just kind of indifferent to or not interested in hiring faculty members who might be more likely to challenge the views. So that has kind of been a long-term kind of a thing. It's probably human nature. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe if probably once upon a time when faculties were dominated by conservatives, it kind of operated the same way. But whatever, now the faculty are dominated by leftists and progressives, and that's the way it works today. But then when that goes on long enough, then what happens is that, say, students who have a conservative nature, who would be inclined to pursue an academic career, but when they enter graduate school, they kind of look around and they see the writing on the wall. They say, I'm probably not going to get a good position or hired at all. And so maybe they end up deciding, they just never enter the field or never complete the degree, and they just go off in search of greener pasture. So to some extent, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have both factors at work.
There's something else at play here, and I know I would imagine you've spoken to some of the same people or people with similar stories who happen to be conservative politically at the University of Virginia, who are intimidated or frightened to speak out or to let anybody know where they stand politically. That seems like a real problem to me, because then it appears that there is no presence.
Yeah. I mean, we have a disjunction between what the top of the administration says it wants and what is actually happening on the ground. So President Ryan has come out repeatedly in favor. He believes in free speech. He believes in civil dialogue. He believes in intellectual diversity. He says he's in favor of all those things. But when you get down to it, in the way things operate on the ground, the campus culture is not particularly amenable to those things at all. It varies from department to department and program to program. I mean, you have like professors like Larry Sabato, who is extremely liberal in his personal views, but his program at the Center for Politics is very welcoming to kids who are conservative or Republican.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Larry's view is that, hey, the fun is in the disagreement. The fun is in the debate. It's when people come together with different points of view, that's intellectually challenging. Unfortunately, and I won't say he's the only one. We have encountered some other professors who actually encourage kind of debate within their classes, but overwhelmingly, it's not that way. And overwhelmingly, it is an intellectual monoculture. And the sad thing is that even kids who are of kind of a moderate or political kind of their instincts are that way, and they come from their families that way, they are never given the intellectual armature to be able to debate the dominant culture. So, I mean, they're never exposed to de Tocqueville or Hayek or, the Austrian School of Economics, or, they never read the Federalist Papers. So they are not conversant with the ideas by which they could actually disagree with the dominant ethos. And that's what's really sad.
So what is to be done about this? I don't know if the Jefferson Council has come up with a step-by-step plan or an outline, but I mean, how do we approach this issue?
Oh my gosh. Well, our main emphasis since we started 3-4 years ago has just been to gain an understanding of what's actually going on at UVA and kind of discern the scope of the problem. It's very easy to get all emotional and wave your arms and make irresponsible accusations about things are worse than they actually are. Now, we don't want to do that. We want to deal with in kind of a reality-based space and say, these are the real problems. And so we've been doing that. And then we've also been working with we're trying to work with the Board of Visitors. Now that the Youngkin appointees have a 13-4 majority on the board, we can supply them with commentary and white papers. I think that maybe the Republican members on the board are more receptive to hearing what we have to say than people on kind of in years past when the appointees were appointed by Governor Northam, a Democrat. So so you got to work at different levels. One is to change the policies, and the policies aren't bad. I mean, UVA ranks number one in the country in the fire ratings based on formal written policies. Now, again, there's a huge gap between what the formal written policies and what actually happens in the campus culture. And in the kind of mid-level of the bureaucracy, but at least that's something. And when you have a formal policy, and they just recently, the Board of Visitors adopted a policy of institutional neutrality, which is that, okay, well, we decided now that the president of the university should not go spouting off on, every latest, headline, or even just the big headlines. I mean, whether it's George Floyd or the October 7th, Hamas terror attacks. Is that the university should restrict itself to issues that directly affect the university. So, I mean, that's a positive step forward. Now, it doesn't really do much to change anything on the ground, but, hey, it's a start, and it's a standard that you can then begin holding people's feet to the fire with.
So as we talk about the Board of Visitors, Jim Bacon, what are some of the issues that the Jefferson Council has raised or will be raising with the Board of Visitors? Well,
our most recent preoccupation, I guess, is the cost of attendance at UVA. And obviously, everybody knows that the cost of higher education, tuition, fees, room, board, textbooks, is out of control. UVA has been relatively moderate, has increased their tuition in the last 4 years. I think it's slightly less than the rate of inflation, although that's hardly anything to brag about because the rate of inflation is pretty bad. But you also have to understand from the perspective that the state of Virginia has also been dramatically increasing its state aid to education with the specific goal of offsetting tuition increases. So I'm not really sure that the board and the administration really deserve a whole lot of credit for keeping increases under rate of inflation. So what we want to do, we want to bring tuition costs down. And we think that there's enough administrative bloat at UVA that it's something that practically can be done. Another issue that we've really delved into recently is the what I call, or many call, the high tuition, high aid financial model. And UVA has kind of adopted a model akin to the elite, Ivy League institutions and others. It's like, we're going to charge what the market will bear, which they do with out-of-state students. Obviously, they keep in-state tuition lower. We charge what the market will bear, and we'll use the excess revenues, what it costs to actually educate these kids, and use it to pay for financial aid for the poor kids. And so our understanding is that 22% of every tuition dollar paid now goes to financing or underwriting the UVA's financial aid program for lower income students. Well, that's great for lower income students, and if you're really, really loaded, you can probably afford it. You may not like it, but you can afford it. But the people who get lost in the shuffle are the middle class. And, there's all this talk about socioeconomic diversity, but we see that the middle class students and their families are the ones who kind of really draw the short end of the stick on that. And we're trying to make a big issue of that.
We've got one segment left, a brief one with Jim Bacon, the Board of Advisors on the Jefferson Council. When we come back on the other side, I want to talk about the faculty discontent at UVA Medical System and what the Jefferson Council is looking into regarding that. The Schilling Show continues into our final segment in just a moment. All right, the Schilling Show into our final segment, continuing with the Jefferson Council, Jim Bacon. So there was a pretty dramatic development. UVA medical faculty expressed discontent in a letter that was made public. I'm sure the Jefferson Council has taken a look at all of this, and I'm just curious what your observations are from the Jefferson Council standpoint and where we go from here.
Sure, Rob. Well, yes, we've been following very closely. We're not involved in this, but clearly it goes to the heart of the way the university is run. The first kind of inklings became open to the public, I guess, to the public notice several months ago. There was a website called Parisiastes. It's based on a Greek word for something. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, they began asking a lot of questions and kind of insinuating and hinting at a lot of things, but not coming out and making any direct observations or accusations or allegations. But within a couple of months of that being out, then the people who are obviously affiliated with this website or Substack account wrote a letter and got a lot more specific in terms of describing different kinds of abuses, managerial abuses that were taking place, particularly singling out the CEO of the health system, Craig Kent, and the dean of the medical school, Melina Kibbe. But the trouble was the charges were kind of vague. They were just kind of like, they didn't get any into the names, places, times, or anything like that. It was just kind of just very general charges. And the other thing was, even though 128 people signed the letter, they did not make the names of the signatories public. So, Jim Ryan's, President Ryan was able to respond, and seemingly credibly so to any outsider who was kind of looking on and said, "Well, look, this is anonymous, a bunch of anonymous people who wrote this letter, and the allegations are just really, really vague. I mean, what am I supposed to make with this?" And so that was his position for a while, and he came out very forcefully in
Yes.
support of the health system CEO and the medical college dean. And so then the Parisi asked these people, came back, and they retorted and say, well, we may not have put all the specific allegations and charges in the letter, but you're very, very familiar with what they are. And then they kind of documented a series of, I don't know, a couple dozen meetings that occurred through beginning from January all the way through this year, in which they met with Ryan, they met with Provost Ian Baucom, they met with Kent and Kibbe themselves, they met with other people in the provost's office, and kind of laying out in much more detail. I don't know how much more detail, but significantly more than was in the letter. So they came back and said, well, you're just blowing us off. You have no credibility in doing that. So it goes back and forth, and then along in mid-September, the Board of Visitors meets, and it was all kind of reaching a fever pitch. The letters were flying back and forth, the announcements, and so on and so forth. And they had a meeting in the Health Systems Board as kind of part of the session. Don't know what happened. Don't know if the issue came up. And surely it must have, but if it did, it came up. The Board of Visitors met in closed session, so the public has no idea of what occurred then. So I know some members of the board were kind of taking the charges seriously, but just don't know what happened. Then the situation took a dramatic turn at the end of last week. On Thursday, the Wright administration kind of came out and said, okay, we take these charges seriously enough, I guess, that we have to hire an independent outside counsel, which is, I think the firm is Connolly and Williams, a prominent D.C. law firm. So that was kind of an admission that, these charges and allegations were serious enough that they had to be looked into. And then, of course, as you alluded to, then Stephen Culp, who was a med school member of the faculty senate, he got up and apparently really went on at quite detail, quite length, and talking about the allegations and charges made by the group. Now, I don't know if he was one of the signatories or not, but he was clearly very well versed with everything that he had to say. So he was probably closely aligned with them. And the most amazing thing of all is the faculty senate went along with him and said, yeah, this is really serious. So the whole the Ryan administration was able to kind of keep the lid on this thing for a while because of the anonymity or the seeming anonymity. They've made a big deal about, well, it wasn't really anonymous. We really did sign put our signatures on it, and we would show them to members of the board of directors. We would reveal the identities of the people to the board, to selected members of the board of directors. But, that is someone on the outside that still looks a little jinky. But now you have someone like Culp with his status coming out and then the administration itself acknowledging that there's a problem. And so we're moving off in a totally different direction now.
Jim Bacon, if people want to get more information or support your efforts at the Jefferson Council, tell us how, please.
Well, our website is at www.thejeffersoncouncil.com, and the front-facing part of it is is kind of just a general description of who we are. But if you want to keep track of all the news that we write about, stories we dig up, make sure you go to the news button on the menu and find out the latest of what's going on that often you're not going to read anywhere else.
Yeah, we barely scratched the surface on all of that today. But, Jim, I appreciate it. Look forward to the next time. Thanks for joining us today on The Schilling Show.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Yeah, and please extend my best wishes to your colleagues. You're doing a fantastic job, and I'm really glad you're there.